Two-time U.S. Open 9-ball champion. Dynamite, Darren, Appleton.
I came from the mud.
Looks good. Looks good. It is good.
Most important one was winning the World 10-ball championship, because it's everyone's dream to be world champion.
Couldn't go into the edge of this.
I'm a grinder, fighter, play with a lot of emotion, a lot of art.
Hello guys, welcome back to another Back to Basics edition, and today we're going to go over where to hold the cue and how to hold the cue. A lot of you has been asking me, a lot of messages, a lot of requests of exactly where do you hold the cue, how do you hold the cue, and so on. So anyway, let's go over it. Right then guys, let's get straight into it. So where do you hold the cue? I've been playing a long time, I've tinkered around over the years, I've watched a lot of videos also, watched other players how they do it, but the number one thing I've found for me is making sure that my forearm is straight and it's in line with my right foot. That is vital. So it doesn't matter if you hold it a bit further back or a bit closer, but then you've got to determine how close your hand is going to be to the cue ball. That is everything. So for me personally, I cue about 8 to 10 inches away from the cue ball, right, with my hand. So that for me, holding the cue at the end of my wrap is perfect, where if I was going to bring my hand up a little bit, I'd probably cue 6 to 8 inches away from the cue ball with my hand. And if I was to come back a little bit, I'd probably be like 10 to 12 inches away from the cue ball. So I'd probably say that's around the average. If you're a shorter person, like one of my students, Kinga, she holds the cue about there, right? But she cues a touch closer to the cue ball, but still keeping that arm straight. That is very, very important. So when I get down to the shot now, this is where I hold the cue for 80 to 90% of my shots. So when I get down and I'm about 8 to 10 inches away from the cue ball, again, making sure that my forearm is in line with my right foot, very, very important, and my upper arm and my forearm is at a 90-degree angle, and my cue is parallel to the bed of the table. So when I'm coming back and through, and I just want to make sure that my elbow is going to work as the hinge, and I'm just going to use my forearm and my hand, my wrist, to do all the work, and then just let it go through, and then everything's going through just nicely. Where if you're holding the cue further back like this, and you're cueing, let's say, the same distance from your hand to the cue ball, like I've just done there, like 8 to 10 inches, the problem now is that my arm's not straight, and you're going to end up doing all this, like a bit of a seesaw going on, like a bit of a shovel stroke. I see that a lot, and you lose feel, you lose power, and you lose timing, and everything's going to rear off line. You're going to choke in the cue also. And there's other people who hold the cue too far up the cue like this, see it all the time, and again trying to cue, let's say, 8 to 10 inches away from the cue ball, and the problem with that is that you can't generate any power. You end up dropping your shoulder, there's a lot of upper arm going into it, and everything's just going to break down. And again, I see that a lot. So it's vital that you keep this forearm straight and in line with your right foot. If you use that as your starting point, it will massively help you out. The only other times really where I would bring my hand up the cue is when I'm very close to the object ball like this, or if I'm cueing off the rail like this. And the only other time when I'd be on back of the cue is when I've probably got a lot of distance between the white ball and my hand, or if I'm really stretching for shots. So if I'm, for example, going to play this type of shot, it's very hard for me to play it as a normal arm position and have my hand, let's say, 8 to 10 inches away from the cue ball, because what happens is that I can't really see the shot or feel it. I feel like I want to be over the shot just to make sure that I can see everything. And what happens here is that you end up doing this a lot. You don't get a rail. But also what I do see a lot of, when you try and play it as a normal setup shot with 8 to 10 inches away from the cue ball, you end up playing the old dreaded double hit. So for this shot here, this type of shot, when I'm close to the object balls, is that I just like to bring my hand up the cue and my hand closer to the cue ball, so that will maintain that my forearm is going to be straight and still pointing towards my right foot. So I'll just get into position here, and then just bringing my hand closer. Now I'm in control of everything. I'm in control of the cue, the weight of the cue, the balance point, but also I can see the object ball while I'm playing the shot. So this is the only time where I don't get low on the shot, like really low on the shot like this. I want to see the shot and just feel it, and then I'm able to get my tip out of the way very quickly, but also able to draw back. So that's very important. Even when I'm rolling up to balls, I see a lot of snooker players and some pool players as well. They try and roll to the ball like a normal stroke like this, but to me it's difficult to feel that shot. So again, I just bring my hand up the cue, make sure that I've got the balance of the cue, and even for this type of shot, I just put my thumb like this, so I can see everything and I can really feel that shot and get it exactly where I want it. And the other one is when I'm cueing off the rail, for example like this. If I was to play this as a normal shot, holding my cue here and try to be 8 to 10 inches away from the cue ball, it's impossible because my hand would have to be here. So if I try and cue the ball like that, I feel like my arm is not straight because I'm too close to the cue ball, but even if it is straight, it just feels very uncomfortable because I'm too choked up. It's very hard for me, and the problem with this is that I've no control of the cue, and the other problem, I'm frightened of hitting the rail before the cue ball, and that's a big no-no. So when I'm cueing off the rail, same again, I bring my hand up the cue, making sure it's in a straight line and pointing towards my right foot, but now I've got total control of the cue and the balance and the weight of it. And then I can really shorten my stroke up because you don't want to put a big stroke on this. And I just concentrate on hitting the cue ball. So now I'm making sure I hit the cue ball before the rail. Just like that, and that's perfect. So that's the only time really when I really bring my hand up the cue for them type of shots. Yeah, and the only time I really bring my hand back on the cue is when there's distance between the cue ball and, let's say, my hand. So that might only really happen when there's cueing off the rail or when you're stretching. So obviously when you're stretching, it's very difficult to reach a shot, so you end up holding the cue at the back. But again, just try and keep your arm straight. Someone like Alex Pagulayan, because he's very short, he has to do that a lot. Obviously he's very good at it. So yeah, but if the cue ball's sort of like that, and I don't feel comfortable about putting my hand on the bed of the table because you're a bit cramped in or it's a bit too close to the cue ball, you just don't feel comfortable. So then I might bring my hand back to the back of the book like this, and then just keeping it nice and straight so that when I come back and through, everything's still going through in a nice straight line. And obviously the only time really is when I'm stretching for shots like this, and then obviously there's a lot of cue between your hand bridge and the tip, so you've no choice really but to hold the cue at the back. But again, just trying to keep that forearm straight even though you're stretching, and just keep everything going because you basically just want the cue going through nice and straight and nice and smooth, and that is the key really. Right, so we've gone over where to hold the cue. Let's go over how to hold the cue. A lot of you have been asking me how to grip the cue, how much tension on the cue, which fingers you hold the cue. It's very simple for me really, is that I've always more or less, when I was younger, I used to hold the cue a little bit tighter. I think that was more like an English 8-ball snooker sort of thing because it's more technical. You're not moving the cue ball around as much, but American pool, it's vital that you have a nice loose grip. So for me, it's very simple. My right thumb, index finger basically do all the work. So I could even just play with that thumb and index finger, and I think I play pretty good. My middle finger's like my third most important, and then my back two fingers are just resting against the cue really. So it's just nice and loose. But the key, you don't want to be like this, and you don't want to be like that. You want to keep your hand, your wrist as in line with your forearm as possible. And then you just want them working together. So your hand has control of your forearm, and if you do that, then your forearm will have control of your elbow and your upper body, your shoulder and your upper arm. It's going to take all the tension away. So just having that nice and loose and coming through back and forth, nice and straight, that is just gonna relax your body. If you choke the cue, that's where the problems are going to start. It's going to get a bit stabby. You're going to rear off line, and if you're on it too loose, obviously that's no good, because then your eight would slip out of your hand. So when you're coming back, you want to hold the cue. When you come back, your hand has got control now, and then when you're going through that, then your forearm is going to follow, and then when you finish, you just slightly grip the cue at the end of your stroke, like that. But after you finish your stroke, you don't want to feel any tension in your arm or any like nipping against your skin. That is very important. So it's just nice and loose, and just fractionally grab hold of the butt at the end. So when I finish my stroke, I can just more or less feel the butt of my hand here just slightly. So that's good. Where if it's like nipping your skin and it's really tense, and it's no good. But a lot of you have also asked, which comes into this also, well, what about the power stroke? Because people say, oh, you can't avoid dropping your shoulder and your upper arm, and that's true. But in my opinion, yes, you have to grab the cue a lot more at the end. You got to put a little bit more into it. So it's just natural that your shoulder and your upper arm is going to drop a little bit. But in my opinion, the shoulder and the upper arm doesn't really take effect until you've hit the cue ball. So for example, if I'm queuing up to the cue ball now, is that when I bring it back, I'm going to power up for a big power shot, but when I pull the cue back and I'm going to play a lot of power, I'm going to hit the cue ball before I bring my shoulder and my upper arm into the shot. So I've hit the cue ball, so I'm lining up, stroke, hit the cue ball, and then that's when the shoulder and the arm drops. So it's nothing to really worry about. It's a bit of a myth, people saying, oh, that's the wrong thing to do, you're dropping your shoulder and your arm. It's unavoidable, really. But in my opinion, that doesn't really break down until after you've hit the cue ball. The only key really is to try and keep as loose as you can. You don't want to be choking the cue when you're playing those big power shots, because it's going to stop you going through. You're going to rear off line, but you're not going to time the ball well. So you still want to be nice and loose going through, and you want to feel your hand, and you want to keep this cue as low as possible. You don't want to be jumping up like this, like a break shot. So you want to keep it as low as possible. So a normal stroke, I'd finish about there, right? Like if I'm queuing up to the ball, I'd finish about there. But for a big power shot, I want to be going through like this. So that's where you do need that little bit of shoulder and that upper arm, is to get that hand going through that little bit more. So what I'm doing is that I slightly just twisting my wrist just a fraction at the end. You don't really need to, but you just got to make sure that it's loose enough to go through, and then at the end of the stroke, you're just grabbing hold of the butt of the cue. And if you do that, then you shouldn't have no problem playing those big power shots also. Right, so that's my advice for you regards where to hold the cue and how to hold the cue. So yeah, I hope you get a lot out of it and you enjoyed the video, and we will see you for the next one.